Hello and welcome to Port Macquarie International Airport. And later today, I'm flying back to Sydney with QantasLink in a Bombardier Dash-8 Q300. Now, I really enjoy flying the big jets, but there's something raw and exciting about flying these little turboprops, especially in weather like this. So let's go check in and see if I survive. Port Macquarie's airport is actually reasonably new, and the whole check-in and security process was flawless. Now there's currently 3 airlines, QantasLink, Fly Pelican and Alliance, flying out of here to Sydney, Brisbane and Canberra. In fact, I've made a few vlogs flying into and out of Port Macquarie with these airlines, and they're on my channel. Once you're through security, you enter straight into the departure hall, which provides great views of the tarmac, which you'll be able to see shortly. There's also a cafeteria with the usual drinks and light meals and a few other bits and bobs for sale. I grabbed a coffee and found a seat near the window. Now here's our aircraft arriving from Sydney, a de Havilland Canada Dash-8 Q300. This particular aircraft was delivered to Qantas brand new in February 2002 and has been flying with them ever since. Now you may have noticed that I called it a Bombardier or Bombardier in the introduction, and that was the name of the company up until 2019 when the de Havilland Canada name was revived and is thankfully far easier to pronounce for this little geek born in rural Queensland. The Q300 is a smaller and slower brother to the Q400, which is the aircraft I flew into Port Macquarie in a few days earlier. And speaking about my other video, I'd really appreciate it if you checked out my channel and subscribed. If you're into aviation geek videos, I think there's a lot there that you will enjoy. The flight was called and we all lined up to get our boarding passes scanned. After passing that, we were out onto the tarmac, and thankfully there was a break in the rain. While today's aircraft is only 18 years old, the actual design is quite a bit older. In fact, the first Dash-8, which was called the 100 model, first flew in 1984. Since that time, the aircraft has been stretched and upgraded with more modern technology, with the 200, 300 and then the 400 series. All of the models after 1997 were sold with active noise cancellation, hence why they all had the letter Q for quiet added to the names. So even though 18 years old sounds old, this is actually quite normal for an airplane. The reality is that it's a tried and tested frame, and the Boeing 747, for comparison's sake, was only just retired by Qantas this year, and its fundamental design is almost 50 years old. Now, as we're boarding, I'll point out that the seats that you do not want to sit in. As you can see now, row 1 on the right hand side of the aircraft actually looks directly into the faces of the row behind it. I imagine it could be quite a bit awkward sometimes. While I was initially allocated here, I changed my seat to 4D so I could get a little closer to the props. Just briefly, here's the seat with individual overhead air vents, which is always a highlight for me, a tray table and limited legroom. Just remember that the aircraft's cabin curls inwards and this strut actually limits your legroom. I didn't have a neighbour, but if I did, and I had a bag stowed under there, it would actually be pretty tight. And right next to me, through the window, was the engine and the landing gear. Once boarding was completed, the Pratt & Whitney PW123E turboprops were powered up, and we took off to the runway. Because it was fairly humid, the propeller tips actually created this very interesting vortices, which you'll see shortly as we take off towards the north. We also got a great view of the city itself and the Hastings River meeting the Tasman Sea. We spun around towards the south and then gradually climbed our way to a cruising altitude of around 22,000 feet, making our way inland to avoid a large storm front that was just to the south of us. Now, I know I commented at the start about the potential for a rough flight because of the weather, but it was actually surprisingly tame. Even just taking off from Port Macquarie and then landing into Sydney was actually really smooth. I still recall flying on board a Qantas A330 out of Sydney a few years ago, and it was fairly stormy, and shortly after takeoff the captain came over the PA announcing that it was going to get a bit rougher. But as he was doing that, you could hear the master caution alarm going off in the background, which was quite exciting, and it was quite rough. Comment below if you've had any dramatic turbulent flights as well. A hot and cold drink were offered, as well as a small snack. In this case, it was a pear, raspberry and coconut slice, which tasted great. Look, it wasn't a meal, but perfectly reasonable for a 58-minute flight. Now, people do regularly ask me what the toilet in a QantasLink Dash-8 Q300 looks like, and here it is. There's a single loo at the front of the airplane for around 50-ish passengers. And back to my seat is the fly well kit, which they give to everyone. Now, masks were not mandatory at the airport or on board the aircraft, but I figured it's a reasonable precaution to make, so I put one on. Just over Cessnock, we started our descent and eventually the ground became visible. We landed from the south, so we ended up flying past Sydney CBD and were provided with some fantastic views of the Harbour Bridge and Opera House. In fact, it actually reminded me of some of the brilliant footage of VH-OEJ, the final Qantas 747, which flew out of Sydney a few months ago, as it made its farewell flight and was flying along the harbour. We flew out off the coast and then back around to land on runway 34 left. I'm not sure what it is, but there's just something weirdly pleasurable about watching the landing gear fold down. Or maybe I'm just a bit weird. There's probably arguments for both sides. So in summary, how was the flight? Look, it was perfectly fine. As I said earlier, I was expecting some turbulence, although it ended up being actually really smooth. I really enjoyed the mechanical rawness of flying in these little turboprops, so this little av geek in me thoroughly enjoyed the flight, even if it was slower and noisier than flying in the standard 737s or A320s that make up the bulk of domestic flights in Australia. In the end, it was just really good to get back up in the air after what has been, frankly, a fairly rubbish year for, well, the entire world. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up and checked out my channel for many more similar aviation videos, including the flight in the opposite direction in the larger and faster Q400. I'm also on Instagram and on Facebook. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time.